So my name is Troy Waller. I am a learning delivery specialist from Microsoft, which is just a fancy way of saying that I am a former teacher. And so I come from 20-something years in education, 16 of that in school. So I don't come at this as a techie, and I don't come at this from, sort of sales and marketing either. I'm coming at this definitely from a classroom and from a teacher sort of experience. Now, this is the third webinar in a series. I think there's altogether 5 or 6 that we're actually going to do in this series. So the first one was the introduction to the inclusive classroom. The second one was the inclusive classroom reading support. And obviously this is now writing support as well. So if you haven't had a chance to go back and look at those first 2, they certainly do build upon each other, each of these workshops. So it'd be really helpful to you if you could jump into episode 1 and then episode 2 and then come back to episode 3. But that being said, this is still quite standalone in some of its features, but there will be times where you're going to be thinking, what's he talking about? And hopefully not too many of those if you haven't seen our first workshop. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start with just a little revisit on personalisation. Now, we really went to town on that in episode 1. But then what we're going to do is we're going to look at Dictate as a writing tool. We're going to look at Editor as well. We're going to look at word prediction. And then lastly, we're going to revisit Immersive Reader, but we're going to look at Immersive Reader in Windows 10, in Office in Windows 10, whereas before we looked at it online, because there's some features that really support writing in that space. So yeah, so we will revisit that a little bit today, or visit it for the first time, but revisiting Immersive Reader. So this is our mission statement. Our mission is to empower every person and every organisation on the planet to achieve more. And as I said in our first session, we're really all about the responsibility that we have for accessibility and inclusivity with our tools. So 100%, it's something that we take very seriously as an organisation and as individuals, and especially in the education team at Microsoft. I talked before about differentiation, and again, I'm not going to go over this too much, but I did talk about differentiation is something where the onus is actually on the educator. So the educator is expected to differentiate their lessons and differentiate their assessments and their engagements, and in turn, reach every one of their students, right? But what I said in the first session is who has time to differentiate, at least into the degree that we're expected to, or that we actually even need to. Because I barely had time to do the basics of my job as a teacher with 25 kids in my class, let alone create special resources for all my kids who needed them, especially when you're not you haven't got an aide or something like that to support you. But we do have this term called personalisation, and personalisation is the way for us to put the onus not on the teacher but on the student instead, because the student personalises their own learning. So the onus is no longer on the teacher, but the onus is on the student to personalise their own experience, and technology really helps with that. Sure, the teacher has to facilitate the personalisation, but ultimately doesn't decide what this looks like, because that's up to the student. So first thing we're going to do today is we're going to talk about dictation. And so dictation, or speech to text, is available across multiple platforms in the Microsoft space. So we have it in Windows, we also have it in Office, and it allows students to speak into their device, and then the written text appears in whatever program you're using. So it's a quick and easy way to create drafts, outlines, notes, or just get thoughts out into text. Now, it is available in Word Online, and it is also available in Word for Windows as well. But I'm going to give you a bit of a demo of what that looks like today, specifically in Word Online. Okay, so I'm going to take you into the browser, and I'm going to show you what it looks like in there. So what I did was I've come to office.com. Okay, so www.office.com. I've signed in using my school email address and password, and this brings me to the Office 365 start page. Now, I talked a little bit about that more in episode 2, so if you want to get your head more around that, please go back and visit that episode. But you can see down here, I've got all my different apps. Now, these are the apps not installed on my local machine, but able to be accessible through the browser. So I don't need to have Office installed on my machine to be able to access these. And one in particular is this one here, which is Word. All right. So when I click on Word, what happens is it opens up just like the start. For those of you that are used to seeing this within Windows 10, you'll see, you come into a new blank document, something like this, and you can see that it opens up inside my browser. It opens up Word. And those of you that are on a more recent version of Word, this is going to look really quite familiar to you. Okay, but we've got Dictate, and Dictate is living over here. All right, so I'm in the Home tab and Dictate is here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Dictate really quickly, and then I'm going to quickly turn it off. The reason being is I want you to actually see some of the features and bells and whistles, but if I wanted to, I could just click Dictate and start dictating. But instead, I'm going to start on it, and then I'm going to turn it off. Now, it is saying that I could have said pause dictation, so it was already listening for those commands. All right. Now, to start Dictate, all I would do is click on this button here again, and I would start. Now, why did I want to stop it? Because I want to show you how to set it up so that you have everything that you need ready to go when you're ready to start. All right. So what I did again was I clicked Dictate and then I quickly paused it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the little settings button over here. All right. So when I click on the setting button, you can see already it's listening. OK, so the microphone is already coming through, but the spoken language there is English UK. All right. So I'm actually going to change that down. I'm going to scroll down to these preview languages, and one of them is English Australia, which means it's going to listen better to my Australian accent. All right. So when you're using this yourself or you're using it with your students, you can set it as to what accent you want it to be listening for. Now, I've realized that this is actually on the wrong microphone, so I'm going to change over to that microphone there, which is a better microphone for me. Now, do I want to auto punctuate or not? Okay, now in this case, I'm going to leave auto punctuation off because I want to show you how we can punctuate. And when we're using this with students, we don't necessarily want the device to be punctuating. We want the students to be punctuating themselves so we can see that they have a proper grasp of punctuation and the usage of punctuation as well. We've also got a profanity filter, which will obviously filter out swear words, etc. We're all adults here, so I'm actually going to leave that off, but I'm not going to use them anyway. So I've set that up and I click OK. Now, the second thing I want to show you before I jump in is that we've got this little help icon down here. Now, the help icon is really important, all right, because if you're using this for the first time or the first few times, you may want to, be able to revisit some of these commands and other bits and pieces. So I go ahead and I click this button here, and then the help dialog opens up over here. Now, the first thing we see is how to get started, right? So it's showing me the bits and pieces that I can do to get started, how to change those language settings, which we just did a minute ago, which you saw me do, and the supported languages that are in there. Look at the supported languages that are in there, right? There's Chinese, different versions of English, German, Italian, Spanish, not to mention all these other preview languages of which Australian is in there as well. Also, there's help there for how to make corrections. And then it's actually got a list of the things that I can say and do. So commands, for example, like punctuation. And again, I'm going to show you those in a minute. But see, it's got the American sort of thing like period, but it's also got the Australian, which is full stop. I have to laugh because my two dogs have been sleeping on the couch all day. And as soon as I start this presentation, they've decided that they're going to fight and argue and carry on. So apologies if you can hear them in the background, but hopefully you can't. Anyway, you can see there I've got comma, question mark, exclamation mark, exclamation point, whichever one you want to say, opening, closing quotes. There's a whole heap of punctuation that's there. But there's also mathematical symbols that I can put in there as well if I say, currencies, emojis, smiley faces, etc. But then there's commands, right? So commands like making corrections to say undo, delete that, insert space, etc. And we'll go through and have a look at those in a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this nice and big so that we can all see this. And I'm going to start and I'm going to dictate a little story that I've got for you. And we can see that happen in real time as you listen. Last Christmas holidays, I played with my puppy Brandy, full stop. I sprayed water at her, full stop. I wrestled her and I played soccer with her, full stop. We sat down together, comma. We said jokes to each other, comma. We played and played until I had to go into the house and eat lunch, full stop. I said to her, comma, open quotes, "You are amazing!" Exclamation mark, close quotes. All right, now I'm just going to bring that down so you can see that there. I'm actually going to close that down for a minute. So there you can see it, right? So last Christmas holidays, I played with my puppy Brandy. I sprayed water at her, wrestled. That's done a pretty good job. Now, one thing that I would change that I know, because I'm a teacher, is I would probably change that to a capital Y, for example. But basically, it's done a pretty good job. It even threw the commas in that I said, the full stops, etc. All right, which is really quite nice. So I know how fast to speak, how slow to speak, etc. You know, so I've been using this for a little while, and as you get to use it more, the more you use it, the better you will get. Now, unlike something like Drag and Dictate, you don't need to train it, but you kind of need to train yourself as you get to use this, and with your students as well, right? Now, the other thing is, it's really going to depend on the hardware on your device. So if you've got a really good quality device, an expensive machine with a really good quality mic, you'll probably be able to just use it straight out, like similar to what I am now. However, if you have a sort of a low cost machine with a sort of, you know, a less high spec mic, then you're probably going to want to buy a headset, okay, with a built-in mic, so that, you know, the mic is more directional and, you know, pointing at the student's mouth. And the more expensive that headset, the better quality the mic will be and the better experience that you're going to have. The other thing I guess I want to stress is that there's a lot of noise in a classroom, and this will definitely pick up all the different voices of the kids. So you need to have the kids in a quiet space where they're sort of away from each other if they're using something like this. Now, you must be connected to the internet, okay, in order to do that punctuation and that kind of stuff as well, because it's using quite a powerful AI and artificial intelligence, and it's listening to your voice. So being connected to the internet is better. The better your connection, the quicker it's going to work. So when I was reading to you then, or dictating to you then, I was actually looking away from the screen because there is a slight delay and it can be off-putting. So instead, what you want to do is you just want to get your kids to just look away, say what they want to say, then look back and pause it. Now, what I want to do now for you, though, is I actually want to show you some of these commands. All right, so I'm going to start dictate again. And you can see that some of my commands were things like undo, delete, delete that, delete the last however many words, delete that word, etc. So we'll just go in and have a bit of a play. Once upon a time, there was a little boy, delete boy, girl, full stop. Delete that sentence. Once upon a time, there was a little boy, delete last word, girl, girl, full stop. Okay, so you can see there that as I'm talking, it's actually continuing to go. Full stop, delete last sentence. Delete paragraph. All right, so yeah, so basically you get in, you have a bit of a play, and you'll find that you can, you know, you'll get better at it as you go along, right, as do I. But you can see down here, I've got things like the ability to these commands like bold, italics, underline, strike through, etc. Indentation is there as well. I'm creating lists and tables. For example, I really like this one, watch this. Troy's shopping list, new line, start list. Potatoes, new line. Fish, new line. Carrots, new line. Delete paragraph. Troy's shopping list. Start list. Carrots, new line. Potatoes, new line. Fish, new line. Rice, new line. Beer and wine, new line. All right, So we're getting there, all right? But again, you just, the more you use it, the better you'll get at it, and that goes for me as well. But you can see there, I can do things like I could start a list, which is what I did there. I can start a numbered list instead, so it'd count 1, 2, 3, etc. I can exit the list. You can create tables and be command. So really, it has really matured a lot in the last little while, where you've got commands and the ability to move the cursor and all kinds of things that are in there. So how did I find that again? I came to office.com. I jumped into the Word icon here, started a new document, and then I clicked on the dictate button over there. Really easy to get into, really easy to use. So there's some of those comments, some of those punctuation and stuff that's in there for you to use. But most important, I guess I want to stress, is that where you can find it. Okay, so dictate is available in Word. It's also available in Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, and OneNote if you've got a Windows device. But if you're online going through your browser, then it's available in Word, OneNote, and PowerPoint for the web. Now, as we saw in our last webinar, Immersive Reader is a very cool free tool that aids with independent reading and comprehension. And because it lives in so many different apps and platforms, it's helping readers with many different aspects of learning. So there are features within this tool that read the text out loud, break it into syllables, provide options for visual layout, such as spacing between the lines and letters and color themes, etc. And I really encourage you to go back and look at our last webinar if you missed that. But writing can also take place when Immersive Reader is being used. So it allows students to consume their text with their visual preferences, as well as hear their writing read aloud. So now students who can't see their errors for a multitude of reasons can hear them. They create revisions and edits with their own voice, and then they hear it read back to them through the entire process. However, when it's combined together with dictate, right, which is what we just saw then, right, the use of dictate. Combining dictation with Immersive Reader means that students can get their ideas out onto page using dictate, but then they can also get some help editing that and being able to see and hear their errors in a way that's much more conducive to them. Okay, so it's going to help them with their editing and revising process. All right, so let's go back into this document here. All right, now let's just I'm just going to get rid of those. Now, what happens is if I was able to dictate that, but still not able to read my own writing, I click on the View tab, click on Immersive Reader. And those of you that were in my last session will remember that it's remembered all my settings. And now I can actually have my own reading read back to me.
Potatoes.
Let's start at the start.
Last Christmas holidays, I played with my puppy Brandy. I sprayed water at her. I wrestled her and I played soccer with her.
All right, so I can hear any errors, or in this case, a lack of errors, and I know that my writing is actually quite good. So what used to happen was the aide would actually, you know, the student would tell the aide their story idea, and the aide or the teacher would write that down for them, and then the aide would read it back to them. Now the technology is actually doing both those things for the student. So there's less stigma. They're using the same software and the same device as everybody else in the room, and they're able to independently get their ideas onto paper and also hear them back and edit those and draft those as well. So what we've also done is we've actually put Dictate and Immersive Reader into the Outlook apps, okay, so both online and the desktop apps, which means now that students can be using, especially in a secondary context where we're emailing the students a lot, students can actually dictate their emails and also have those emails read back to them, which is really, really quite powerful. All right, so I'm just going to show you where that lives. So I'm going to come back here into Office and I'm going to show you here Outlook. Okay, so there's my Outlook app, or I could be opening the full version of Outlook if I had that as well. And you can see here's an email that's actually been sent to me. Okay, and then just to know, so I can show you where it lives, the actual Immersive Reader is in these ellipses here. I click on that and there's Immersive Reader and there's my email read to me, right? And then in the same way that I just did with Outlook, with Word, I can dictate emails back to my teacher or to my student, depending. All right, so that's Dictate, and that's Dictate together with Immersive Reader and what it can do in supporting writing. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about, though, is I want to talk to you about using some other tools to support writing, and one in particular is what's called Editor. But before we jump into that, I want to just remind you that when we're supporting students to write, we don't want to overwhelm them, all right? So fixing everything as a student is not necessarily going to be productive. We want to scaffold, right? We want to support them in what's age appropriate, etc. But we want to encourage students to choose what's most important for them, whatever it is that they're working on, or whatever it is that's, as I said, sort of age or grade level appropriate. We also know that tackling everything at once can be overwhelming, so we don't want to overwhelm them. But we want tools to let students self-assess their writing so they can clearly see what it is that they work on. So let's talk first of all about spell check, right? So those of you that are probably on something like Office 2016, right, which is, by the way, a very old version of Office, actually 6 years old because it was released in 2015. You're probably still using that. And when you right click on a word, okay, you're going to get a drop down of some suggestions, okay, and off you go. But the problem is if students are challenged, that's not going to be very helpful. So let's have a look at some of the challenges students face when trying to spell check a document. Spell check software typically shows a list of spelling suggestions, and when you right click or tap on a flagged word like we do up here, there are several different, you get suggestions, right? But there are several different reasons why people with a challenge such as dyslexia, for example, have difficulty selecting the correctly spelled word from that list there. First, they have difficulty perceiving the difference between similarly spelled words and determining which of them is correct. For a lot of the students, this just isn't going to help them, okay? And this can be due to visual attention challenges remembering spelling rules, an absence of visual memory, tracing the correctly spelled word. And it didn't help that Office used to give us a spelling menu that only showed the suggestions themselves, all right, without any context to help the student choose the right word. Now, secondly, having too many choices slows decision making and causes what's called decision fatigue. And this applies to everybody, but especially to young writers who have difficulty with reading speed and accuracy or a slower processing time. And thirdly, unique spelling error patterns can cause words to look very different from the intended word. So historically, Office spell check optimized to show a smaller number of highly likely suggestions for the most common error patterns. And so therefore, it didn't often have suggestions for unusual error patterns such as these, right? So basically what I'm saying, it doesn't always help depending on the challenge that you have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you in and I'm going to show you the fully installed version of Word. So this is I'm no longer in the browser. I am now in the fully installed version. So I've got Word for Windows 10, okay? And this is for Microsoft 365 apps. So it's the most up-to-date version. Look, there's Dictate sitting over there. So it's actually in there. And you'll know you've got an up-to-date version if you can see Dictate. If you don't see Dictate, then you know you need to update your version of Office. So you can see here that the word principal is spelled wrong. Now, what most of us would do is we will right-click on that word, okay, and then traditionally we'd get a list of suggestions. Now, look what happens now. What happens now is I actually get 3 suggestions, okay, and I've got synonyms underneath, okay? So you can see it says principal, code source and rule, principal, main leader, superintendent, and principals, value, code sources. So it's actually giving me synonyms, all right? But it's still very text heavy, isn't it, right? There's still lots going on there with the text. So what I can do is I click this little arrow and then I can have the suggestions and the synonyms read out loud to me. Have a listen.
Principle, similar to, code, source, rule.
All right, come over here. Let's see if it's this one. Read aloud.
Principal, similar to, main, leader, superintendent.
All right, and so that's the one that I'm looking for. I click on that and it changes the word to principal. All right, and so what it's doing is it's not just giving me the synonyms, it's also reading those out to me. Okay, again, we need to make sure that we are in the up-to-date version of the installed version of Word to be able to access this. Now, let me talk to you about some of the things that are going on that we can't necessarily see or necessarily know is going on. First thing I want to talk to you about is the synonyms. So, all right, so why have we chosen the synonyms as opposed to definitions or usage samples. And that's because they are the most efficient at the level of reading. The fewest words are required to convey enough information to make a decision. And of course, less text will help students, for example, because of something like visual crowding. All right, there's too much going on the page. So less text will help with an impaired visual search, right? So it becomes less of an issue. We've also improved the spelling suggestions themselves. So you're now connected to the internet, so you're leveraging an online spell check engine, which provides a larger language model and a phonetic spelling component that gives us better suggestions. So I say all that to say it's just better, okay, than what we were used to in the past. So again, I right-click my word and there I get my suggestions, my synonyms, and if I want to hear them.
Principle, similar to, code, source, rule.
All right, and then I can hear my suggestions. Now, when we talk about editor, editor is this button up here, which I was clicking on before to show you. This is now where spell check lives. We don't call it spell check anymore. We call it instead editor. Now I'm going to show you the first thing that happens. The first thing that happens is it actually gives me an editor score. Okay, so the student can actually look at that and see what their score is, and it's based on the number of errors and the document length, and also the refinements and suggestions as well. Now, what a lot of people aren't aware of, some of the changes that have happened, you see this little drop down here. When I click on it, I can choose to use it as to suggest to me for formal writing, to suggest to me for professional writing, or to suggest to me for casual writing. Now, in this case, because we're thinking in a school environment, then we're going to go with formal writing. Now, you can see here that it's actually telling me that there are 10 spelling errors in here. Now, what it's doing is it's actually taking the entire sentence out, right, out of the text, pulling it over to the side, moving it away from all the busyness of the actual document, right? Now, those of you that are old enough to remember, once upon a time, this is exactly how spell check worked. We didn't get to do it in the document. But for some children, there's too much going on. Even if I right click over here, there's just too much going on that page. So being able to pull it out into a sidebar like this is actually really good for a lot of these kids. So the first thing it does is it pulls the sentence out and I get to hear it and hear the error in context. So let's have a listen.
I could throw it at my principal to scare her.
All right, so I can hear that error that it's principal. And I also know that that red squiggle means a spelling error, right? So I've got my suggestions down here. So again, I've got the suggestions. I've got the synonyms there too, but I've got the ability to read aloud outside the document.
Principal, similar to, main, leader, superintendent.
And what's also there is spell out, which will spell the word for me.
Principal.
All right, so I can actually hear that, right? And let's say I want to have a listen to this one. I just want to hear the spelling.
Principle.
All right, so I can do it that way as well. Now it will actually pull all these out according to category, right? So it will check my spelling first, then it will check my grammar, then I can go into, and so these are ones that need to be changed, and then I can go into things like refinements. All right, so that's things like looking for clarity, conciseness, punctuation conventions, vocab, etc. I've got a really basic plagiarism checker, a similarity checker as we call it. All right, but it's just going to check online. It's not as sort of detailed as Turnitin or some of these other ones as well. All right, so that's what that looks like in there. All right, so that's editor in the full version of Windows 10. But we've also built editor into the browser. All right, so if I come into my browser experience up here, and this is exactly the same document, I'm going to turn on editor. Okay, and you can see here now that it's actually, and this one's actually working a little bit better. It's giving me my editor score. All right, but it's also showing me the ability to go between formal, professional, and casual as well. All right, it's bringing those corrections out in that sidebar so I can look at my spelling, for example, but it's not as feature rich as the installed version. So I'm not going to get my synonyms, and I haven't got read aloud either. So if you're wanting that read aloud, you need to go into the full version of Windows 10. All right, but you can see down here I've got my refinements, okay, so things like conciseness, formality, inclusiveness, and I can set those as well, all right, depending on what's important for me. I've got my similarity checker as well. I've also got text prediction, which means that as I start to type words, if I've got a good enough internet connection, it will actually bring up suggestions like your phone does, right? Is this the word you're looking for? What I really like over here, though, is what's called the document stats. So it's showing me everything that I need to know about my document in this one place. So I don't have to go and, do word check and then spell check and all. It brings it all together. So I can see the number of words, the number of characters, how many paragraphs are in there, the time to read it would take to read, the time it would take to speak it out. And then we've got a Flesch-Kincaid score, right? And that's actually different to our editor score. So it's actually showing me the Flesch-Kincaid score based on the sentence length and the number of syllables per word. And it's telling me that this article that I've written here is basically at a 7th grade reading level. All right. And then how many suggestions were in there as well. So I could actually do a screen grab of that and share it with my teacher if I wanted to. But it also helps me to know that next time, hey, look, I've got a better Flesch-Kincaid score. I've got less errors to fix, etc. All right. It's also got some enhancements in there. It's saying if it's going to suggest headings and other things as well. So it's actually going to give a lot of that writing support that once upon a time the aide or the teacher used to do. Instead, now the student is able to do this. As long as they're connected to the internet, they're going to be able to use a lot of these tools as they go. So that's Editor in Word for Windows 10 and Editor for Word in the browser. But Editor is also in a number of other tools as well. So it's in PowerPoint, it's in Outlook and some of these other tools. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you about is word prediction for Windows 10. So if you've got a Windows 10 device, you can actually set it to begin to give those word predictions as you go, much like your phone does. So you can see here, this little girl is typing, the elephants were probably going to get to the river to get a drink of, and she starts typing and up comes these suggestions, right? So kids that are struggling with spelling, this will actually help them because they'll see those suggestions as they go. So how do we find it? We go into our Windows settings by hitting the Windows key and finding a little settings wheel, and then just start to type the word predict. And you'll see this little one come up here, which says show text suggestions as I type on a hardware keyboard. You click on that, and it'll open up this menu down here, and down here on hardware keyboard, just click on show text suggestions as I type. Now, if your language pack is set to English Australia, then it will suggest English Australian spelling, but if you're coming in on an American one, it'll do the American, etc. All right, so just make sure that you have your language pack on your machine set to Aussie. All right, now another thing I want to talk about, right? And so those of you that were in my last session where we talked about Immersive Reader, I do want to take you back a little bit, because when I showed you Immersive Reader, I showed it to you in the browser. I didn't show you Immersive Reader inside Windows 10. And the reason why is because Immersive Reader inside the full version of Windows 10, and let me just open that up. The full version, inside the full version of Windows 10, Immersive Reader is different. Okay, now the reason why we've not made it the same is because you are more likely to be building in the fully installed version, right, inside Office. So we have left it as is, right? So I'll show you what that means as I go along. So when I click on View and then I click on the Immersive Reader button over here, you're going to see it's very different from the other version of Immersive Reader. Okay, so we've still got the ability to edit the document, and that's important when we're writing, whereas we can't edit the document when we're in the online version. I'll show you what I mean. If I come in here to Immersive Reader, right, so here's Immersive Reader in the browser, I can't make any changes without going back out to the original document. Whereas when I'm in the Windows 10 version, I can make changes to the document. I could start typing, okay, I could start saying the boy. You can see I can make changes whilst Immersive Reader is running, which is brilliant for writing. So I can still change the column width, okay, so I can make that narrow, I can make that wide, I can make that moderate, for example. I can change the page color as well. I'm going to leave that as is. I've got 1, 3, and 5 line line focus. Again, I'm going to turn that off. I've got the text spacing, all right, so I can turn that into nice big spacing for me when I'm doing my, we'll see if I've got dyslexia, for example, spacing between the letters, lines, and words. I can syllabify in there as well, and I've also got the ability to read aloud.
The Pacific Northwest tree octoposes are from Rhine forests on the...
Okay, so it's actually reading that out to me. But what it means is I can still be making those changes as I go and still having that immersive reader support. So it really helps with writing much more than the other version of Immersive Reader, which is better help around the reading. Okay, so little rule of thumb, but it's not a hard and fast rule, is that if you are wanting to use Immersive Reader for reading support, use it in the browser. If you want to use it for writing support, then you can use it over here in the full version of Windows 10. Okay, so Dictate and Editor are available inside so many tools inside Office, but please remember that because they are inside these online tools, they are also inside Teams, okay? So when you start to use your learning engagements or deliver your learning engagements inside Teams, then you'll know that the students are automatically going to have both Editor and Dictate as writing support across those tools. Little reflection point that I want you to think about. Okay, because if we don't give it some application, it'll just become another PD and we'll forget. So I want you to think about how you intend to use these writing support tools, you know, Dictate, Immersive Reader, and Editor with your students. Have you got anyone in mind that you think you could use it with that student? And so go out and start using it with a student this week, right? Maybe start with Dictate, then move on to Dictate and Immersive Reader, and then maybe move on to Editor. And how would the students benefit from using these writing support tools in your classroom? All right, so have a bit of a think on that after this PD. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, the link is here, aka.ms/inclusive writing demo. This will actually take you through step by step and show you a lot of what I've shown you today. You can get the recording, of course, but nevertheless, if you want to share this with your colleagues or with families, aka.ms/inclusive writing demo, and it will take you through and step by step show you how to use that. Next time when we get together, we're going to talk all about maths. Okay, it's going to be a much shorter session than we've had today, but we're going to look at the maths support tools that we have in OneNote and the maths support tools that we've also built into the Edge Reader. So hopefully you can come back and be a part of that next time. Stay connected with me. I am available for you on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Just do a search for me, Troy Waller. You know it's me because you'll see my avatar, which is that. It's the same on all of them, and that's how you know it's me and not another Troy Waller. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much for being a part of today, and I hope you've got a lot out of it.